I think that most of the business owners don't even have a sense of consciousness about building a business as an investment, treating it like an investment, and then liquidating it so they can move into the next phase of their life. I'll give you a quick example on this. If you talk to business owners about the value of things, what is the value of their business, what percentage of them do you think can give you an accurate valuation on their business? I mean, I find that so far in my life it's been 0 out of several hundred that I've talked to. So they may have some idea of the value, usually exaggerated the value based on some construct that could only exist in their own mind, and no willing buyer would ever pay them for. But occasionally you run into some where it's tremendously undervalued, and they're just ignorant. They don't know the facts. They don't know how to perform a valuation. But they're usually looking to make all of their money on the sale of that business. So they'll say, well, I'm going to sell this business for $20 million. And that'll be their number in the first meeting that you have with them. If you could help me sell this business for $20 million, I'd sign the papers today. How many of you have had that conversation before? And then what you have is a creeping value, because they start thinking about that number a little bit more. And they start doing really interesting things. I call it the Eric mode. I worked on this project with a guy named Eric years ago, owned a business, and he told me his magic number was 10 million. But over the next month or two, he spoke to different people in his life, and he offered to pay off their mortgages. He offered to pay off his sister's mortgage, his mother's mortgage. He had a couple of daughters, and he wanted them to each live in a house which they owned free and clear. And by the time we got done, his magic number was no longer $10 million, it was now $25 million. There was only one small problem with that. Only a complete idiot would pay $25 million for Eric's business. And there aren't very many complete idiots with $25 million. So that would be sort of the problem in the Eric model. So I introduced Eric to this concept of not having to make all of your money on one transaction. He said, you know, Eric, if you look at it this way, you're tired of this business, you don't want to do it anymore, it drives you nuts, you're sick of it, so you don't want to be here. He was lying to himself, telling himself that he was an absentee owner. But I was with him when he was an absentee owner, and his phone rang constantly. He could never be in the moment doing anything because he was always on the phone with some sales manager or some sales rep or somebody someplace who was trying to close a deal, and they were using the old, let me check with the owner close. And they literally would call him. He would take the phone calls. It was a huge distraction to everything I was trying to do with him. And he self-sabotaged every time he turned around. But the biggest point of sabotage on a macro level was not having clarity about what he wanted, and then being disciplined and focused enough to stick with it. And I gave him this analogy. I said, Eric, I want you to imagine you bought a single-family residence as an investment. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Southern California, and you paid, of course, $700,000 for it. And you decide that your magic number is $25 million. Do you think it will ever be likely that you could sell that single-family residence for $25 million? What's the answer to that question? Even Eric was smart enough to get this question correct, right? No, no one's going to pay. Right, exactly. So what if you said, well, I'm going to start with this property, I'm going to acquire other properties, I'm going to convert properties into apartment buildings and shopping centers and office buildings, etc., and that's how I'm going to get $25 million of net worth. Does that model work? Why don't business owners look at businesses that way? What if they could just stop and think about it in those terms for just a minute and think about, well, mathematically it makes no sense to think that this single-family residence, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, is ever going to be worth $25 million. So I need a better strategy when I look at my business, because the way my business is, the markets it's in, or maybe it's a franchise or something like that, it has certain limiting factors. Maybe all of them are within the owner's mind, but nevertheless, that business isn't going to be worth $25 million. Well, what if you sold it for $14 million, and then you sat on a beach for a year or two and you thought about life and things? You know, the amazing thing is that when you become available to opportunities, what happens? They flow to you. They're everywhere, right? So rather than being engrossed in the day-to-day of running a business that you really don't want to be involved with anymore, what if you just exited from it, sat on the beach for a year, thought it through, looked at the opportunities that presented themselves, and you can go build another company and sell it for $50 million.